Hey everyone, welcome back to First-Hand Globetrotting. It's been a while since my last trip, and I don't have any upcoming travel plans, so today I'm doing another throwback vlog. This one is from a trip I took to San Francisco, California in 2017. It was a short trip, so I wanted to hit the ground running. As soon as I landed, I headed straight into the city to start exploring. I thought that downtown would be a good place to start since the Port of San Francisco Ferry Terminal looked so nice. It had a little park with palm trees in front of it, definitely putting me into a California mindset. But looking back at it, downtown may not have been the best place to start off my San Francisco adventure. I was expecting it to be more like a city center downtown area, when in reality it was more like a business district downtown. Oh well. Market Street runs on a diagonal right through the heart of it. It's really unusual how the roads on one side are all at one angle, and the roads on the other side are at a different angle. If you look at a map, Market Street looks like a magic dividing line that changes the street directions. Otherwise, it was mostly just a lot of tall buildings in pretty much every direction. I'll admit, some of them had nice, older style architecture and a more classic look to them. But none of them really jumped out at me as must-see buildings. Kind of the same financial district buildings you'll see in any major city. What did catch my eye were these things called privately owned public spaces. Basically, in order to get a permit for a new building, you need to have some sort of park-style area that anyone can visit. So there were a bunch of little mini urban parks all over, with some of them kind of hidden away. I felt like with a few of them, it was almost like the owners didn't actually want you to find them or know you could go there. After seeing everything I wanted to see downtown, I headed about 3 miles down Market Street to the next neighborhood I wanted to visit, the Castro. On its surface, it was a pretty hip neighborhood filled with lots of shops, bars, and restaurants. But I didn't need to walk around long before I was seeing rainbow pride flags everywhere I looked. On the buildings, on lampposts, on houses, in store windows, even on the crosswalks, they're flying everywhere. It's probably safe to say that the Castro is the most famous LGBTQ neighborhood in the US, maybe even in the entire world. I didn't know much about LGBTQ history, but even I knew how important and influential the Castro is. I mean, the pride flag was even created here. Other than country flags, I can't think of another flag that's more well-known or flown so many places around the world. The Castro also had a few monuments to the sadder moments in LGBTQ history, like the terrible impact of the AIDS epidemic. As I was walking around, it was hard to miss the sign for the Castro Theater. It's a really cool-looking 1920s theater with a huge marquee that you can't miss right on Castro Street. Whenever I think of San Francisco, I think of all the hilly roads. Walking around the Castro, I got my first taste of that. Pretty much everywhere you go is either uphill or downhill. These ones weren't super steep like some of the ones in San Francisco, but it still makes them look really nice as you walk along the sidewalks. Overall, I thought the Castro was a great place to visit. Not only because of the history and cultural impact it's had, but also because even now it's a pretty fun and lively place to be. On to day 2, and I'm heading to prison. Not just any prison, one of the most famous ones in the world, Alcatraz. It's on an island, so I headed down to Pier 33 to catch the ferry across. Tickets to this are super popular and sell out weeks in advance since there's only one company allowed to take people there. I bought my ticket nearly a month ago, so I was good to go. It was a pretty big boat with a few levels, but if you wanted a seat, they went pretty fast. I didn't need one though. I was headed up to the upper deck so I could have a look around and enjoy the ride. If you're on a boat heading to an island, you may as well enjoy the view, right? Not only can you see Alcatraz slowly getting bigger and bigger as you drive towards it, but you can also see Golden Gate Bridge off to the side. Then, if you look the other way, you see different coastlines off in the distance. Eventually, Alcatraz is the only thing you see in front of you. When I turned back around, San Francisco was way back in the distance. I'm always a sucker for nice skyline views from the water, so that was definitely a bonus. It's a nice short ride. I think it was only around 30 minutes or so the trip from beautiful San Francisco to an island prison is pretty quick. As we were docking, the whole island was already looking really cool, so I couldn't wait to get off the boat and start exploring. The main prison is definitely the highlight of Alcatraz, but one of the suggestions I got was to explore the island first before going there. Since everyone comes off the same boat, it's a huge wave of people getting there at the exact same time. So while most of the people went over to get in line to go into the prison, I wandered around until the crowds died down. It was really interesting to see how the island has the main prison right in the middle, but the rest of it is like a little town. I didn't really think of it before coming, but it makes sense that you'd need things like water towers and maintenance buildings and places for the guards to live and all sorts of other support buildings. There are little roads and paths you can take all over the island, so I spent some time wandering around and exploring. Even if the old buildings don't interest you at all, it's worth it just for the view. Pretty much everywhere you stand on the island, you can see the water. But as I turned away from it and looked up, I just saw the big, imposing prison building looking down at me from the top of the island. The main prison is pretty much as colorless and bleak as I expected. As soon as you see it, you know that it's not a very fun place, and it's definitely not somewhere you want to be. It must have been such a weird experience for the prisoners. The island is so small, so the water's edge is never very far away. And you can see land in every direction, but the amount of water between you and freedom seems huge. You've got the skyline of a beautiful, world-class city like San Francisco clearly visible in the distance, but it must have seemed a world away for everyone stuck on the prison island. Without even setting foot inside, I definitely understood why the idea of Alcatraz Prison is so captivating and why it's so famous. It really is just a bunch of prisoners stuck on a tiny island in the middle of the bay. But by now, I was ready for the main event, so I headed inside Alcatraz. As you can see, there was still a little lineup to get inside, but it didn't take very long at all. You get an audio guide before you go in so you can do a self-guided tour. As soon as I walked in, it was incredibly obvious that I was in a prison. See the multi-tier rows of cells, almost like little prison streets. They even gave them New York City themed names like Broadway, Times Square, and Park Avenue. But just looking around, this is pretty much exactly what you think of when you picture an old-timey maximum security prison from movies, isn't it? Honestly, I was expecting the prison to be bigger. There were only a few hundred cells total, arranged into 4 rows, so it's actually pretty compact. I guess I always just assumed that it was some huge complex that held thousands of people. But it was built to lock up only the worst and most dangerous criminals in the United States, so it probably didn't need to be too big. A lot of them were household names that I actually recognized, like Al Capone, the Birdman of Alcatraz, and Machine Gun Kelly. I can't even imagine what it must be like spending years and years and years of your life in here. Just look how tiny the cells are. Most of them are closed, but a few are open so you can walk inside and see the rooms for yourself. As soon as you step through the door, you really feel how small and confining it is in here. And this one didn't even have a bed in it, which would take up pretty much all of the free space that was actually in here. Definitely not the type of living conditions I'd want. They have some of the cells decorated like prisoners might have done, so you can get an idea of what they would have looked like back then. It must have been so dark in the cell blocks. There were some barred openings in the ceiling letting in some light, but even on a super sunny day like today, it was still pretty dreary in here. No matter how small and gray and gloomy the normal cells were, it was nothing compared to the solitary confinement cells. There's a solid outer door to keep out the light, then the regular barred cell door, and then the pitch blackness of the cell. The regular cells are terrible, but these ones are on a whole other level. As I was walking around the prison, I couldn't help but look up at the gun galleries. That's where the guards would patrol so they could keep an eye on everything down below and make sure the prisoners didn't act up or try to escape. If any of the inmates were lucky enough to have a visitor come by all the way from the mainland, they'd just be able to see them through a tiny little window along the visitation wall. Not a very personal experience, almost like looking in at a caged animal in a zoo. And isn't it wild that this tiny little control room was used to run the entire prison? I've shown you some of the nice views from around Alcatraz Island, but my favorite ones are just outside the administrative building where the control room and offices are. The buildings outside there are mostly in ruins and there's a little lighthouse tower, but those aren't the interesting parts. Since it's at the tip of the island facing San Francisco, you get an absolutely incredible view of the city and the skyline. I doubt the prisoners got to see this view very often, but the staff got the type of panoramic view people would pay a lot of money to have. One of the only places where I really saw many windows for the inmates to look out of was up in the dining hall. But the more I thought about it, I wasn't sure if they did that to give them a nice little view while they ate their meals, or to remind them that they were stuck on an island with no hopes of getting back to the mainland. I was expecting the kitchen to have more of an open cafeteria counter where you get your food, but even it was locked away behind bars. What a great place Alcatraz is. I'm so glad I came. It was the first time I've ever been in a prison, so that was interesting enough. But the location of it, and its legendary status, and the feeling of what it was like being trapped on a prison island were so cool. After spending a good chunk of my day on Alcatraz Island, I got back on the boat for the ride back to San Francisco. While Alcatraz was fun and all, it's definitely nice to be able to wave goodbye to it at the end of the day. Not quite the same experience as the people who worked there or the prisoners that were locked up there. Before long, the boat was pulling back into the pier and I was back on solid ground in San Francisco. And I'm sad to say that this was the end of my time here. Short and sweet, not even 48 hours in the city. But I packed in as much as I could in such a short time. I felt like I only scratched the surface of what there is to see and do here. The city has so many interesting neighborhoods that I didn't get to see, like Chinatown and Little Italy and Fisherman's Wharf and so many others. I'll admit, spending so much time downtown wasn't my best move, but the Castro and Alcatraz were amazing. There was no way I was going to come to San Francisco and miss Alcatraz Island. It was worth it and lived up to my expectations. Hopefully I'll get a chance to come back here someday and see everything I missed. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed looking back with me on my 2017 trip to San Francisco in this throwback vlog. If you have any questions, ask me in the comments. While you're at it, like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel. On Twitter, I'm Firsthand Globe. On Instagram, I'm Firsthand Globetrotting. Follow me on there. And don't forget, it's an incredible world out there, so pick up your passport and do some firsthand globetrotting of your own.